In the UK, one viewing metric has YouTube edging out the BBC. Meanwhile, global ad tier usage continues to grow, driven by Netflix, and Peacock is losing key Versant programming. Listen on.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and Colin Dixon from End Screen Media, of course, joins me. Colin, how's everything on your end?
It's great, Will. One of the things I've been doing is I've finally gotten around to watching the final season of Stranger Things on Netflix. Netflix is going to be one of the things we talk about on the podcast today, and I am halfway through, and it is awesome. I am so enjoying it, rationing myself, trying not to binge it all at once. I love that show.
You know, I never caught the Stranger Things bug, Colin. I have to admit that. What is it about it that really grabs you?
So I think they've really done a great job in capturing the 80s, you and I both lived through it, and they've done a really good job capturing the 80s. But it's got the sort of schlock horror thing just perfect. I don't find it scary at all, but it's just a great monster feature. The monsters that they've created for this are just really fun to watch, and the whole thing is just really well produced, and the effects are fantastic. It's just a great package, Will.
Well, I'll have to add it to my list. I feel like I've really missed out on a cultural moment by not watching Stranger Things. But let's go ahead and get started. We have 3 items we want to talk about this week, and you're going to get us started with some new data about YouTube and BBC.
You bet. So we've talked a lot about the popularity of YouTube versus broadcasters here in the US, and it is not reserved just for us. New data out of the UK rather, says that the reach of YouTube for the first time beat the reach of the BBC, which is obviously the biggest broadcast company in the UK. 51 million versus 50.8 million viewers between October and December in 2025. Now, they were using a 3-minute viewing threshold, so if you watched for anything on either of those content sources for 3 minutes or more during that measurement period, you were counted. And the BBC gamely says it's still the leader for deeper engagement. When you look at a 15-minute measure, it averages 47 million viewers, and I don't actually see the number for YouTube here when you measure on that window, but it certainly emphasizes the struggles that professional content providers are having in dealing with this YouTube model. It is just so powerful. We've seen them introduce AI tools that helps creators make better quality and premium quality content, which also works extremely well on the television. Increasing number of creators are creating longer content, which is more applicable to TV. And as I say, YouTube does not pay a penny for that content. It earns its own way based on advertising revenue. And it seems that model, is working just as well in the UK as it is here in the US. And I suspect it's probably working in a whole bunch of other countries just as well, too.
Yeah, I hear you, Colin. And, as you mentioned, just to be a little bit fair to BBC, that metric that YouTube edged them out on is that 3-minute period, 3 minutes or less. Whereas if the metric is lengthened to 15 minutes or more, BBC still has a pretty good edge on YouTube. So I think it speaks to the dynamic of how people use YouTube. Again, relatively short bursts on YouTube, jumping from one thing to the next, whereas BBC is more known for their full-length programs, right?
This is absolutely true. But it actually speaks to another thing here, Will. Unfortunately for broadcasters around the world, here in the US, the UK, and everywhere, they are now in a position where they really need to be providing content on YouTube if they want to reach sections of their audience. And that means that they are, in effect, aiding the enemy. They absolutely have to be there. There's no question. If they want to be watched by younger viewers, they need content on YouTube particularly. But increasingly, everybody is watching particularly clips, etc., and short news summaries on their phones via YouTube. So they totally have to be there. But at the same time, that gets people on YouTube as a platform. YouTube starts recommending videos to them, and they start spending more time on that platform. So it is kind of a vicious circle for them. They have to pay a lot of money for the creation of the content. YouTube pays nothing for that. And they have to also be on there with some of their premium content. And once again, YouTube pays nothing from that and gains benefit from it. So it's kind of a vicious circle, and it's difficult to see how you get out of that and how YouTube doesn't keep growing.
Yeah, YouTube is such a quirky competitor in that way, right? Because, as you say, they're valued for their promotional support by traditional content, premium content providers. But at the same time, whenever anything goes over there, it only helps YouTube become that much bigger and stronger. So what do you do with a competitor like that? And it's also, I think, just worth noting here, as we've talked about before on the podcast, that Nielsen's The Gauge is consistently showing YouTube as having the largest share of U.S. viewing time on TVs, typically hovering somewhere between 12 and 13%, give or take. So here in the U.S., YouTube already has established the pole position and only probably expanding from here. It sounds like this is a phenomenon that's also reaching into the UK and other countries probably too in the world.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, Will. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how YouTube's ad revenue continues to grow in 2026. It was a juggernaut in 2025. And we'll probably, as I say, I don't see anything else but more growth for it in 2026. But maybe we should move on to our next topic.
Absolutely. And this relates to some new data from Digital Eye about the growth of ad-supported tiers by streaming services in a bunch of different countries around the world. And you and I have been talking about ad tiers for, I don't know, since the beginning of time. And the research is really showing how pivotal these tiers have become for all the major SVOD services. So focusing first on Netflix, which, as we all know, is a real resistor to the idea of introducing ads. That tier has completely changed the complexion of Netflix. Digital Eye noted that in Q3 of 25, 40% of active accounts, of Netflix's active accounts, were for the ad-supported plan, 40%, and that's in about in 20 different countries that Digital Eye was measuring. And that is up, that 40% is up from 26% just back in Q4 of 24. So Netflix ad tier subscribers active accounts up from 26% to 40%. But they're not alone. Virtually, it seems like every other major streaming service also saw an increase. So just recapping some of the numbers, Disney Plus up from 35% to 44%. HBO Max up from 22% to 28%. The only one that seems to have declined is Amazon Prime Video, which went from 88% to 82%. Reminder, they have sort of a funky model there where everybody was defaulted into the ad-supported experience. So, you know, they really started almost at 100%. You have to opt out of it, in order to not have ads. So slightly different model there at Amazon, but just also looking at it another way, it seems that the viewing time also, so not just the percentage of subscribers, but also the viewing time has also increased in these ad-supported tiers. And now referring to a report from ComScore, they said that the time spent on the biggest ad-supported streaming services rose to 43% in 2025, with Netflix up in the lead with 45% of its viewing hours in the US now on the ad tier. That was up from 34%. So I think I know I just went through a number of different data points there, but I think really the main point here to take away is that it wasn't that long ago when these services were all ad-free. They started to bump up against flattening growth in their ad-free services. They launched the ad-supported tiers, and now a big chunk of their overall business is among these ad-supported subscribers. And I think it really goes to show how, had they continued to resist introducing lower-priced ad tiers, the nature of the streaming business would be completely different today. It would be a much smaller business. And so they wisely and finally recognized the need to roll out these lower-priced ad-supported tiers, and it's been a major win for them.
It certainly has, Will. And one of the things that the digital eye data highlights is how well Netflix has done with ad-supported tiers. Now, I don't know if our listeners rather remember, but the way Netflix and Disney introduced ad-supported tiers was a little bit different. Netflix introduced a lower-priced ad tier and didn't demand that consumers do anything. They did this in cahoots with their introduction of password sharing. So they wanted to give, I think the idea was a very good one, they wanted to give people who were not willing to subscribe to Netflix at the current price ad-free, they wanted to give them a cheaper option. If they were users, password sharing users, they wanted to give them a cheaper option. Well, Disney didn't do that. What Disney did was they introduced an ad tier at the same price as the cheapest premium tier, no ad tier, and then increased the price of that tier. So unless you opted to go, you could opt to go to the ad tier, and then you could opt to go to the ad tier, or stay on the no ads tier and pay more. So it looked like when Disney did this, a lot of people were given that choice, and they opted to go to the ad tier. So you would have expected Netflix to be considerably behind Disney Plus in the number of ad viewers just because of the way they introduced the tiers. Netflix was relying on new subscribers, and Disney was trying to push existing subscribers into the ad tier. Well, according to this data from Digital Eye, Netflix has virtually caught up. 40% of Netflix subscribers are on an ad tier, and 44% of Disney Plus subscribers are on an ad tier. So I think that's pretty telling right there. But one of the key things here for Netflix in doing this is making those ad tier subscribers as valuable to them as the ad-free subscribers. And the last time they commented on this, which was I think at the beginning of last year in their earnings call, they said that they still had some distance to go here, that the people watching ads were not generating as much revenue as the people who were not watching ads. And remember, they have one of the largest differences between the cost of ad-free viewing and ad-loaded viewing. I think it's $10.50 or something like that. Quite a big number. So that's a big number to make up in ads. I don't know how aggressively they're going to go after evening that up. I hope that doesn't mean that they'll increase the ad load pretty dramatically. I think that will be a bad move, because one of the things I hear from people that have gone to the ad tier is that the ad tier is so low people find the user experience still a fabulous user experience. They're not, they don't find themselves being really distracted from the content that they want by too many ads. So I don't know what they're going to do to even that up, Will, but I know that it's not coming right now from growing CPMs. I think their CPMs are actually have shrunk since the introduction a little bit, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, good questions. And the ad-supported tiers are probably only going to grow in their relative percentage from here. So it is a challenge that they need to surmount. Let's go ahead and go along to our next story.
Well, there was one more point in there, Will, and that was the overall spending on content, right?
Right. Yes. Sorry, there was a related point here that we wanted to make, which is that some other data that we saw this week, we just observed from Ampere that global content spending is predicted to go up just 2%, not that significantly, but 2% to $255 billion globally. And Ampere said that that's really driven primarily by streaming services. No big surprise there. And that, the shift in spending between streaming services and broadcasters continues unabated. And we all know the pressure that both broadcast and cable TV networks are under related to cord cutting and other factors, and that of course cycles back into the budgets that they have to invest in new content. And so the Ampere data suggests that shift is continuing, that divergence between streaming services and the local broadcast networks continues to widen.
Yeah, and to sort of link that back to our first article, Will, about the BBC, not only are folks like the BBC struggling to really deal with YouTube, they're also facing increased content creation costs because of the entrance of streamers into the market. The streamers are spending so much now that it has pushed the price of content creation up for the broadcasters. So they're in a situation now where they have to spend more to make the same. But they're also battling companies that are spending more than they are to keep up. And it's even doubly worse. The countries are hurting themselves because they now have, many of them have introduced rules that say streamers must spend a certain amount of their content spend on the creation of content in the local region. So this is true throughout the EU, for example. I think it's 15% of what they spend in the EU needs to be spent there. So this creates another problem for the broadcasters in dealing with the global broadcasters, because the global broadcasters are now spending money locally to create content which they're bringing into their service, which makes them more attractive to the local audiences as well as to the global audiences. So it's really a tough old business now for those old broadcasters.
Yeah, and just adding one thing to that also, I think, is the dynamic in sports right now, where we're seeing the streaming services going hard after sports rights, and their entry into this space is only pushing up the cost of rights and therefore putting even more pressure on broadcasters and cable networks for that matter. Case in point, I think, is how Amazon got a piece of that NBA deal squeezing out TNT. There's that to me is textbook about how this world is shifting from cable and broadcast to streaming.
Yeah, and that sort of relates directly to our last item this week. Of course, with the breakout of Versant Media Group from Comcast, that is now complete and done. We talked about that in a recent podcast. Now that's done. Peacock has actually lost access now to the content that it was getting from MS Now, CNBC, USA Network, Sci-Fi, Oxygen, and others, which have all gone out into Versant. And this is a kind of a double problem for Peacock, Will. The first is obviously having less content in the service means people will watch less. You are going to attract less viewing if the people that were watching that content on your platform, if that content vanishes, then they have to, if they want to continue to watch it, they're going to take their viewing elsewhere to one of the virtual MVPDs or signing back up for their traditional pay TV. So that's thing one. That's a challenge, and to a lesser extent, I think it also threatens subscribers. You may see subscribers cancel the service because they're just not using it as much as they were because that content has vanished. So that's one thing. The second thing is I think it really aggravates the fragmentation problems for users. And I want to explain why by talking about my particular experience with Premier League here. One of the things that's always been a bit of a mystery to me, Will, is how they divvy up the games between broadcast, the Premier League games between broadcast on USA and NBC and Peacock. And I'll give you a great example. This weekend, there are two really good games that are involving my teams, Chelsea-Brentford, which is on Peacock exclusively, and Nottingham Forest-Arsenal, which is on USA on the cable channels. So because of this split now, I will not be able to see the Nottingham Forest-Arsenal game at all on Peacock. I can watch a delayed broadcast of that. Well, apparently that's going to be going away. So I won't be able to watch those at all. And so this creates another fragmentation problem for me. And I will comment as well that it seems to me that USA is getting the top game for that day. It's not just a question of them getting a game, they're getting the top game, the one that most people would want to watch. So that's super frustrating for somebody like me who subscribes to Peacock purely and simply because they want to watch Premier League. That means now I must still have a virtual MVPD or something so that I can continue to watch those premium games. And I wonder if something similar is also happening with the NBA games, because of course part of Comcast's deal with the NBA was that some of those games would appear on broadcast channels like USA, cable channels like USA. And I'm wondering if they're also getting premium NBA games and the other games are going to Peacock. So this is a problem for viewers as well. And, this is something that we really didn't talk about very much when we talked about the split from Versant, but it's definitely having an impact on Peacock viewers and Peacock itself.
Right. So this one kind of snuck up on me, Colin. I didn't realize that this was going to be happening. And it obviously prompts the question, like, what's going on here? Is Versant, is Versant, now that it's a separate company from Comcast, without necessarily having allegiance to Peacock, does it mean that Versant is going to be trying to optimize the monetization of these various channels and programs, sports that they have, or try to retain some value in their distribution agreements, or both for that matter? Whereas, and because they no longer have like a sister entity, so to speak, in Peacock underneath the Comcast umbrella.
It makes me wonder if Disney isn't going to swoop in here and see if they can cut a deal with Versant to get what had been NBCU content back on Hulu, for example, from these channels, from Sci-Fi and Oxygen and USA, if they're going to come in with some sort of deal there to get them back on Hulu. I don't know. But it does fit with what the brief was, which was they were splitting these assets out so that they could optimize the value of those assets, and the other company can focus very closely on streaming. So I totally wouldn't be surprised if a deal like that was done.
And there we have it. So I think we have covered what we wanted to cover on today's podcast, have we not?
Well, I think we have.
Awesome. So good chatting, Colin. Thanks everybody for listening in, and we'll see you all again next week, right?
You bet. Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.